I returned home unannounced after a month in Paris to find my only daughter fighting for her life alone in the ICU while her husband was popping bottles on a luxury yacht with my credit card. I stood over her bed, looking at the machines breathing for her, and made one phone call that turned his paradise into a prison. An hour later, he was begging me for mercy, but I had none left to give. My name is Althea Jenkins. I am 65 years old, and I do not play games when it comes to my child. Before I tell you how I destroyed a man without lifting a finger, please leave a comment telling me where you are watching from and subscribe to the Never Too Old channel. We are building a community of women who know that wisdom is a weapon. Now, back to the story. The flight from Paris to Atlanta landed 40 minutes early. I walked through the terminal with my Louis Vuitton carry-on, expecting to see Hunter waiting at baggage claim. My son-in-law had promised me 3 times before I left Europe that he would be there. He made a big show of it, saying, "Mama Althea, you just relax. I will handle everything." But the arrivals curb was empty. I checked my phone. No text messages, no missed calls. I dialed his number, and it went straight to voicemail. I dialed my daughter Nia, straight to voicemail. A cold feeling started at the base of my neck. It was not panic yet, just the sharp instinct of a woman who spent 40 years running a hospital emergency department. I know when something is wrong. I called a car service and sat in the back seat, watching the familiar streets of Buckhead roll by. It was a Tuesday morning. Hunter should have been at his office, or at least answering his phone. Nia should have been at her design firm. When the car pulled up to their driveway, my stomach dropped. The lawn, which Nia prided herself on keeping manicured, looked like a jungle. The grass was knee-high and yellowing. The expensive Japanese maple tree I had bought them for their anniversary was dead, its dry brown leaves scattered across the walkway. But it was the mailbox that made me tell the driver to wait. It was stuffed so full that envelopes were spilling onto the ground. Bright red envelopes. Final notices. I walked up the front steps, my heels clicking on the stone. The silence was heavy. Usually this house buzzed with life. Nia loved music. She loved cooking. But the house stood dark and silent like a tomb. I pulled out my spare key, the one Nia gave me secretly 2 years ago, just in case. I unlocked the heavy oak door and pushed it open. The smell hit me first. It was the sour, heavy scent of rotting food and stale air. The air conditioning was off, and the Georgia heat had turned the house into an oven. I stepped inside and dropped my bag. The foyer was a disaster zone. Mail was piled on the entry table unopened. But then I saw it. Right there by the door sat a pair of shoes. Not Nia's shoes. These were cheap, glittery platform heels, the kind a woman wears when she is selling something other than her personality. I walked into the kitchen. Dirty dishes were stacked in the sink, covered in mold. A pizza box sat open on the counter, the crusts hard as rock. And stuck to the stainless steel refrigerator was a note handwritten in sharp, angry letters. "Eviction notice pending. Call the bank immediately." My hand was shaking as I reached for the counter to steady myself. Nia was meticulous. She was the heir to the Jenkins Trust. She had been raised to never miss a bill, to never leave a dish dirty, to never let her home fall into disarray. Where was my child? I turned to go upstairs to check the bedrooms when the house phone rang. The landline. Nobody calls landlines anymore unless it is a bill collector or an emergency. I picked it up, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Hello, this is the Jenkins residence." There was a pause on the other end. Then a voice I recognized, a voice from my past life. "Mrs. Jenkins, is that you?" It was Dr. Marcus Hill. He had been a resident under me 10 years ago. Now he was the chief of medicine at St. Mary's Hospital. "Marcus, what is it? Why are you calling here?" "Althea, listen to me. You need to get down here. It is Nia." The floor seemed to vanish beneath my feet. "What happened?" She is alive, Althea, but it is bad. She is in the ICU. She has been here for 3 days. Sepsis. It started from a simple infection, but it went systemic. She is in a coma. 3 days. My daughter had been lying in a hospital bed for 3 days. Where is Hunter? I screamed into the phone. Where is her husband? That is why I am calling you, Althea. We cannot find him. We have been trying to reach him for 72 hours to get consent for an emergency procedure to drain the infection. He is not answering. He told the nursing staff 3 days ago he was going on a business trip and not to disturb him. Nia is alone, Althea. She is fighting for her life completely alone. I hung up the phone. I did not scream. I did not cry. The time for tears was over. The time for war had begun. I looked at those cheap glittery heels by the door one last time. I looked at the unpaid bills. I looked at the mold in the sink. Hunter had not just neglected my daughter. He had left her to die while he played bachelor. I got back into the waiting car. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. His eyes were wide, seeing the look on my face. "Where to, ma'am?" "St. Mary's Hospital." "And drive fast." When I walked into that ICU, the nurses parted like the Red Sea. They knew me. They knew I used to run this place with an iron fist, and they saw the look in my eyes now. I marched straight to room 412. Naya looked so small. My beautiful, vibrant, brilliant girl was pale as a sheet hooked up to 3 different machines. A ventilator tube was taped to her mouth. Her skin was hot to the touch, burning with fever. I looked at the chart hanging at the foot of the bed. Her white blood cell count was through the roof. Her kidneys were failing. Marcus walked in looking tired and grim. "I am so glad you are here, Althea." We went ahead and did the procedure without consent. I utilized the emergency medical doctrine. If we had waited another hour, she would be dead. "You did the right thing," I said, my hand gripping Nia's limp fingers. "But why did nobody call me sooner?" Hunter listed himself as the only emergency contact. He specifically removed your name from her file 6 months ago. He told us you were estranged, that you were senile and living in a facility in Florida. I stared at him. The audacity, the pure evil calculation of it. Hunter had been isolating her. He had been planning this. Marcus handed me a plastic bag. Naya's personal effects. We had to cut her ring off Althea. Her fingers were so swollen. I took the bag. Inside was her wallet, her phone, and her wedding ring. I took out her phone. It was dead. I plugged it into the charger by the bed and waited. While it booted up, I held Nia's hand and whispered to her, "Mama is here, baby. Mama is here, and I am going to fix this. I promise you, I am going to burn his world down." The phone buzzed to life. I knew her passcode. It was her birthday. I opened it and went straight to her banking app. It required Face ID, but her eyes were closed. I typed in the backup code, 0000. I had told her never to use such a simple code, but thank God she had not listened. The balance on her primary checking account was negative $4,000. The savings account was empty. I opened her notifications. They were flooded with alerts from American Express Visa and MasterCard, high-value transaction alerts. I opened Instagram. I did not follow Hunter because I could not stand looking at his fake smile, but I searched for his profile. It was public, of course. He wanted the world to see him. And there it was, posted 2 hours ago, a live video replay. I clicked play. The sound of bass-heavy rap music filled the quiet ICU room. The video showed bright blue water, a white deck, and Hunter shirtless wearing sunglasses holding a bottle of Cristal champagne. He was laughing, his arm draped around a woman in a neon pink bikini. I recognized the shoes by the door. "To the good life, boys!" Hunter shouted over the music. "Just closed the biggest deal of my life. Weekend of healing." Someone in the background asked, "Hey, where is the wifey?" Hunter laughed, a cruel, dismissive sound. "Oh, she is at home resting. She is just a little under the weather. You know how women are always dramatic about a headache. We are not letting that kill the vibe." He popped the cork and sprayed the champagne over the women who squealed and laughed. I looked at the timestamp, 2 hours ago. While my daughter was lying here with a tube in her throat, fighting a septic infection that was shutting down her organs, her husband was drinking a $5,000 bottle of champagne on a yacht in Miami. I paused the video on his laughing face. I looked at the bottle of Cristal. I recognized that bottle. It was a vintage I had bought for Nia as a wedding gift. He had stolen it from their wine cellar. I put the phone down. I felt a calm settle over me. It was the same calm I felt before I went into surgery, the calm of knowing exactly where to cut to remove the rot. I did not call Hunter. I did not text him. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had on speed dial. Davis, it is Althea. Althea, you are back from Paris early. I am at the hospital. Listen to me very carefully, Davis. I am activating the emergency clause in the Jenkins Trust, Section 42. There was silence on the line. Davis had been my lawyer and friend for 30 years. He knew what Section 42 meant. It was the nuclear option. It gave the trustee absolute power to freeze all assets associated with the beneficiary if there was evidence of incapacitation or fraud. Are you sure, Althea? Once we pull that lever, everything locks down. Every account, every card, every asset, even the joint ones. I am looking at my daughter in a coma, Davis. And I am looking at her husband spending her money on a yacht in Miami with a woman who is not his wife. Freeze it all. Cancel the credit cards. Mark them as stolen. Call the bank and freeze the joint checking. And Davis, call the Coast Guard in Miami. Tell them a vessel has been rented using a stolen credit card number. Althea, that could get him arrested. That is the point, Davis. Do it. Now. I hung up the phone. I sat back in the chair next to Naya's bed. I smoothed the hair back from her sweaty forehead. Just rest, baby. Mama's taking out the trash. I watched the clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. It would take about 15 minutes for the banking systems to update. 15 minutes for the satellite signal to hit that credit card terminal on the yacht. I imagined the scene. Hunter ordering another round of lobster. The waiter bringing the machine. Hunter flashing that black card with my daughter's name on it. The waiter inserting it. The pause. The decline message. I waited. 30 minutes passed. Then my phone rang. It was Hunter. I let it ring. I watched his name flash on the screen. Hunter hubby, with a heart emoji Nia had put there. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately. And again. On the fourth call I picked up. I did not say hello. I just listened. Nia. Nia, pick up the phone. There is something wrong with the bank. The card is declining and these people are acting crazy. You need to call the bank right now and authorize this. It is embarrassing, Nia. I let him scream for a few seconds. I could hear the panic in his voice. The music in the background had stopped. I could hear voices arguing, probably the captain demanding payment. Hello, Hunter. The silence on the other end was instant. Althea. You sound stressed, Hunter. Is there a problem with your business trip? Yes. Yes, Althea. I am in a very important meeting with investors and there seems to be a glitch with the accounts. Is Nia there? I need to speak to her. Nia cannot come to the phone right now, Hunter. She is a little under the weather. You know how women are. Too dramatic. There was a pause. A long, cold pause. He realized I had seen the video. Althea, look, I can explain. This is a networking event. It is for the business. Networking. Is that what you call it? Tell me, Hunter, does the networking include the girl in the pink bikini? Or did she come with the stolen champagne, Althea? You are misunderstanding. Put Nia on the phone. I am her husband. I have a right to speak to her. You have no rights, Hunter. Not anymore. I just spoke to the bank. I reported the card stolen. I reported the car stolen. And I reported the yacht rental as fraud. What you can't do that I am stranded out here. The captain says he is turning the boat around to hand me over to the police. Well then, Hunter, you better start swimming, because the police are the least of your problems. When you get back to Atlanta, you are going to wish you had stayed in the ocean. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. I looked at Nia. The machines beeped steadily, a rhythm of life that was holding on by a thread. He is coming, baby, but he is walking into a trap. I sat there in the dim light of the ICU plotting. Hunter thought he was playing checkers, but he had just sat down at a chessboard with a grandmaster. He wanted the money. He wanted the life. He wanted my daughter dead so he could cash out. But he forgot one thing. He forgot who her mother was. The doctor came back in to check her vitals. Any change, I asked. Not yet. But Althea, I need to show you something. The lab results from the admission came back. We ran a toxicology screen because the infection was presenting strangely. He handed me a clipboard. I scanned the numbers. My medical training kicked in, overriding my emotions. "This cannot be right," I said, pointing to a line on the page. "That is what I thought," the doctor said, lowering his voice. "We found traces of an immunosuppressant in her blood, a drug used for organ transplant patients to stop their bodies from rejecting new organs. It weakens the immune system." "Nia has never had a transplant," I whispered. "Exactly, and there is no medical reason for her to be taking this. But this explains why a small cut on her hand turned into life-threatening sepsis. Her body has no defenses, Althea. Someone has been poisoning her." I looked at the report. Then I looked at the bag of Nia's belongings. I dumped it out onto the bed. Lipstick, wallet, keys, and a small orange prescription bottle labeled amoxicillin. I picked up the bottle. It looked normal. I opened it. The pills were blue and white capsules. I opened one capsule and tasted the powder on my tongue. It was bitter metallic. I handed the bottle to Marcus. "Test these, now." He nodded and ran out of the room. I stood by the window looking out at the Atlanta skyline. The rage inside me was cold now, solid as ice. Hunter had not just neglected her. He had not just stolen from her. He had actively tried to murder her. He had been weakening her immune system, waiting for an infection to take hold so he could play the grieving widower and collect the insurance. I pulled out my phone and called Davis again. "Althea, did he call you?" "Yes, but that is not why I am calling." "Davis, I need you to hire a private investigator, the best one money can buy. I want to know about every insurance policy Hunter has taken out on Nia in the last year. And I want a security team at the hospital within the hour." "Security. Why?" "Because Hunter is coming back. And when he realizes the money is gone, he is going to try to finish what he started. He is going to try to kill her, Davis." I heard Davis gasp. "Althea, are you saying—" "I am saying he has been poisoning her. We have proof. Get the security. And Davis, get the paperwork ready. I am going to need a power of attorney, and I'm going to need it before his plane lands." I hung up and sat down. I took Nia's hand again. It felt a little warmer. "Wake up, baby," I whispered. "You have to wake up. You need to see this." I waited. The sun began to set, turning the sky a bruised purple. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the rat to run back into the house. I pushed through the double doors of the intensive care unit, and the smell hit me instantly. That sharp, sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with the underlying odor of sickness. It is a smell you never forget even after you retire. I spent 40 years walking these halls wearing a white coat and commanding respect, but today I was just a mother walking into a nightmare. Nurse Brenda looked up from her station. She saw me, and her eyes went wide with panic. She started to stand up, probably to tell me I could not be back there, but I did not slow down. I marched straight to bed, 412. I grabbed the metal chart hanging at the foot of the bed, and my eyes scanned the numbers faster than any machine. Blood pressure critical, white blood cell count sky high, organ function declining. I looked at the IV bag hanging on the stand. It was nearly empty. The drip was too slow. I turned to Brenda, who was hovering nervously behind me. "Why is this bag empty, Brenda?" I asked, my voice dropping to that low tone that used to make residents tremble. Why are her lips chapped and dry? "Is this how you care for patients when I'm not watching? Did you forget everything I taught you about patient dignity?" Brenda stammered an apology and rushed to change the fluids, her hands shaking. I turned my back on her. I could not waste energy on incompetence. I looked down at my daughter. Nia was so still. My vibrant, laughing girl was lost under a tangle of wires and tubes. A ventilator tube was taped to her mouth, forcing air into her lungs. Her skin was gray and clammy. I reached out to hold her hand, needing to feel her warmth, needing to know she was still there with me. I took her left hand in mine, and my heart stopped cold. Her ring finger was bare. Nia never took off her wedding ring. It was my mother's diamond, a family heirloom that I had placed on her finger myself on her wedding day. But now it was gone. I looked closer. The skin around her knuckle was red and raw. There was a deep purple bruise forming at the base of her finger and a scratch mark dragging upward. It looked like she had fought. It looked like someone had forced that ring off her hand while she was too weak to stop them. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded my veins. I knew exactly where that ring was. I knew exactly who would steal from a dying woman. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Hunter. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to hear him lie to me so I could destroy him. The phone rang once, twice. Then the call was declined. He sent me to voicemail. I stared at the screen, my hand shaking with the need to throw it against the wall. Then a notification popped up at the top of my screen. Instagram. Hunter is live now. I tapped the notification. The video loaded instantly. The silence of the ICU was shattered by the tinny sound of loud rap music coming from my phone. The screen filled with bright sunshine and blue water. And there he was. Hunter standing on the deck of a massive white yacht, holding a glass of champagne and laughing at the camera while my daughter lay dying in the dark. I held the phone so tight my knuckles turned white, watching the spectacle unfold on the small screen. The contrast was sickening. Here in the ICU, the only sound was the rhythmic mechanical hissing of the ventilator keeping my daughter alive. But on the screen, it was a cacophony of bass-heavy beats and shrieking laughter. Hunter was center stage, shirtless and glistening with oil, looking like a man without a care in the world. He had his arm draped around a woman who looked young enough to be his student, her neon bikini, leaving absolutely nothing to the imagination. She was feeding him grapes like he was some sort of emperor, while he laughed that hollow, charming laugh that had fooled us all for years. Someone off camera shouted a question over the music, asking where the lady of the house was. Hunter did not even blink. He leaned into the camera lens, winking conspiratorially. "Oh, you know Naya," he shouted, his voice dripping with fake affection. "She is having a spa day back at the resort. She needs her beauty sleep while the big dogs play. A spa day." My daughter was lying in a coma, her body ravaged by infection, and he was telling the world she was getting a facial. The tears that had been threatening to spill over minutes ago evaporated instantly. The grief in my chest hardened into something cold and sharp like a diamond. I was done crying. Crying was for victims, and I have never been a victim a day in my life. Then I saw it. Hunter reached into a silver ice bucket and pulled out a bottle of champagne. The sunlight caught the label, and I felt the breath leave my body. It was not just any bottle. It was a Dom Perignon vintage 1998. I knew that bottle because I had hunted it down myself at an auction in London. I had given it to them for their 5th wedding anniversary, with a note saying, "Save this for a moment of pure joy." It was supposed to be sitting in the climate-controlled cellar in Nia's basement. He had stolen it. He had looted my daughter's home while she was dying, packing her most precious possessions to impress a boatload of strangers who did not even know his last name. He popped the cork, the foam spraying over the deck, while everyone cheered. That was the moment he ceased to be my son-in-law. In my eyes, he was no longer a human being. He was a cancer, and I was the surgeon who was going to cut him out. I swiped the app closed, cutting off his laughter. The silence of the hospital room rushed back in, but it did not feel empty anymore. It felt charged with electricity. I looked at Nia, her face pale and still against the white pillow. "I am going to hurt him, baby," I whispered to her. "I am going to hurt him in the only place he feels pain, his wallet." I dialed Davis again. He answered on the first ring, his voice tense. "Althea, are you all right?" "I am better than all right, Davis," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I am focused. Listen to me. I want you to activate the emergency clause immediately." Section 42. Althea. That is the nuclear option. That freezes everything. Joint accounts, personal accounts, assets held in trust. He won't be able to buy a pack of gum. That is the point, Davis. I want him stranded. I want him humiliated. I want every card in his wallet to turn into a piece of useless plastic within the next 5 minutes. Do it. Freeze it all. Right now. The Miami sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that matched the cocktails flowing on the deck of the Lady Anastasia. Hunter leaned back in the white leather captain chair, feeling like a king. He snapped his fingers at the server, a young man named Diego, who had been refilling glasses for 6 hours with a forced smile. Another week, Hunter announced loudly, making sure the girls in the jacuzzi heard him. "Tell the captain we are extending the charter. Put it on the black card." He pulled the heavy titanium American Express from his wallet. It was Nia's card, the one linked to the main trust account. He tossed it onto the silver tray like it was nothing more than a guitar pick. Diego nodded and walked to the portable terminal on the bar. Hunter watched him, a smirk playing on his lips. He was already planning the evening's menu: lobster, wagyu beef, more of that vintage champagne he had found in the cellar. Then came the sound, a sharp, dissonant beep that cut through the ambient house music like a knife. Diego frowned, checking the machine. He inserted the chip again. Beep. Sir Diego said, his voice losing that deferential warmth reserved for paying customers. "The card has been declined." Hunter laughed, a nervous barking sound. "That is impossible. Run it again. It is an unlimited card. Do you know who I am?" "I have run it 3 times, sir. It says, 'Card not authorized, pickup requested. Do you have another form of payment?'" The conversation had caught the attention of the guests. The music seemed to get quieter. Hunter felt the heat rising in his neck. "Fine," he snapped, pulling out his wallet. "Use the Visa." Beep, declined. The MasterCard. Beep, declined. Hunter was sweating now. He pulled out the business debit card, the one for his startup that was actually funded entirely by Nia's savings. "Try this one." Beep, declined. The atmosphere on the yacht shifted instantly. It went from an exclusive VIP party to a crime scene. Diego picked up the tray, sliding the useless plastic cards back toward Hunter with the tip of his finger as if they were contaminated. "I will need to speak to the captain," Diego said, his face hard, "and we will need to settle the tab for the open bottles immediately. Cash." "Wait," Hunter stammered, standing up. "It is just a glitch. The bank is probably just doing a security check because of the large amount." He looked toward the jacuzzi for support, but the water was empty. The girls were already wrapping themselves in towels, whispering to each other, and gathering their designer bags. They knew the smell of a broke man, and it was wafting off Hunter in waves. "Where are you going?" he called out. "Party is over, honey," one of them said, not even looking back. "Call us when the card works." Alone on the deck with the captain striding toward him, looking furious. Hunter pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking with rage. He dialed the one person he thought he could bully into fixing this. Althea. She was probably still in Paris or jet-lagged and confused. He would yell at her, tell her the bank made a mistake, make her fix it. She picked up on the second ring. "Althea," he shouted, trying to sound authoritative despite the panic rising in his throat. "You need to call the bank right now. They froze the accounts by mistake, and I am in the middle of a client meeting. It is humiliating. Fix this immediately." The voice on the other end was not confused. It was not sleepy. It was the voice of Judgment Day. "There is no mistake, Hunter, and there is no client meeting. I suggest you start swimming to shore, son. The police are waiting at the dock. Althea, you need to listen to me very carefully because you are making a huge mistake." Hunter shouted into the phone, his voice cracking with a mix of arrogance and terror. "I am in the middle of a high-level negotiation with international investors. If you do not unfreeze these cards right now, I will sue you for interfering with my business. Do you hear me, Althea? I will sue you for every dime in that trust." I let him finish. I let him scream his threats into the humid Florida air, while I sat in the air-conditioned silence of the ICU holding my daughter's cold hand. When he finally stopped to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was low. It was the voice of a judge passing a death sentence. "Is that right, Hunter? International investors. Tell me, is the investor the girl in the neon pink bikini who was just feeding you grapes, or is it the captain of the Lady Anastasia who is currently wondering why his $50,000 payment just bounced?" The silence on the line was heavy. I could hear his breathing hitch. "How do you—" "I am not finished, Hunter. You are drinking a bottle of Dom Perignon 1998. You stole it from my daughter's wine cellar before you left her to die. You are wearing the Rolex she bought you for your anniversary, the one you claimed you lost last month. And right now, you are trying to figure out how a senile old woman in Paris knows exactly what the deck of your yacht looks like. Althea, wait. It is not what it looks like. I was going to explain. There is nothing to explain. You see, Hunter? I did not just call the bank. I called the United States Coast Guard. I told them there is a vessel currently located 3 miles off the coast of Miami that was rented using stolen financial instruments. I told them the man on board is in possession of stolen property and is attempting to flee. You did what? Are you crazy? Look over the railing, Hunter. Tell me what you see. I could hear the rustling of the phone as he moved. I imagined him stumbling to the side of the boat, his face pale beneath his tan. Then I heard it through the receiver, the faint wail of sirens. Not police cars. These were the heavy, deep sirens of a Coast Guard cutter. Oh, God. Althea, call them off, please. They are coming right at us. That is the consequences of your actions arriving, Hunter. You have 2 choices. You can stay on that boat and get arrested for credit card fraud in front of your little friends, or you can get yourself back to Atlanta right now and pray I do not have you charged with attempted murder before your plane lands. Murder? What are you talking about? Nia is just sick. Nia is dying, Hunter, because you poisoned her, and I have the pills to prove it. The sirens were louder now. I could hear the captain of the yacht shouting at Hunter in the background, telling him to get off his boat. I have no money, Althea. You froze everything. How am I supposed to get back? Figure it out. You are a big businessman, right? Sell the watch. Beg your friends. But if you are not in this hospital room by tomorrow morning, I will hand the toxicology report directly to the district attorney. I hung up the phone. My hand was trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer force of my rage. I looked at the black screen. I knew what was happening on that boat. The humiliation, the panic, the begging. Hunter did not have friends. He had leeches, and leeches do not lend money to a man who is drowning. He would have to crawl, he would have to scrape. He would have to sell the very image he had spent my daughter's money building just to buy a middle seat in economy class next to the bathroom. I looked at Nia. The first battle was won. The rat was flushing out of its hole. Now I just had to wait for him to walk into the trap I had set in this room. Come home, Hunter. Mama is waiting. Hunter arrived at 9 in the morning, looking like he had been dragged backward through a hedge. The golden boy of Atlanta was gone. In his place was a man wearing a wrinkled linen suit that smelled of stale airplane air and desperate sweat. His eyes were bloodshot, and he had a day of stubble on that jawline he spent so much time admiring in the mirror. He did not come alone. Trailing behind him like a lost puppy was a man in an ill-fitting polyester suit clutching a briefcase that looked like it was made of cardboard. This was the best legal counsel a man with $0 could afford. I was sitting by Nia holding her hand when the door banged open. Hunter did not rush to his wife's side. He did not touch her forehead or whisper her name. He marched straight toward me, his finger pointed like a weapon. You have 5 seconds to explain why my cards are declined and why there is a hold on my accounts, Althea. He hissed the words, trying to keep his voice down, but the rage was vibrating off him in waves. I did not stand up. I did not blink. I just looked at him with the kind of pity one reserves for a bug right before stepping on it. Hello, Hunter. How was the flight? I hear the middle seat in economy is very character-building. He turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He turned to his discount lawyer. Tell this old woman who is in charge here. The lawyer cleared his throat nervously, looking at the machines keeping my daughter alive. Ma'am, my client, Mr. Sterling, is the legal next of kin and the medical proxy for his wife. Any interference with his financial access is a violation of marital asset statutes. We are prepared to file an emergency motion. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You can file whatever you want, son, but right now you are standing in my hospital. Hunter stepped forward physically, shoving his body between me and my daughter's bed. He used his shoulder to check me, pushing me back toward the wall. It was a small violence, but it told me everything. He turned his back to me, blocking my view of Nia. You are an outsider here, Althea. He said it loud enough for the nurses in the hall to hear. You are just her mother. I am her husband. I make the decisions. You are nothing but a guest, and right now you are trespassing. Get out! He wanted a reaction. He wanted me to scream and fight so he could have security drag me out. I saw the game. I smoothed my skirt and took a step back, giving him the space he demanded. Fine, Hunter. You are the husband. Show us what kind of husband you are. Dr. Hill walked in at that moment holding a chart. He looked from me to Hunter, sensing the tension in the room. Mr. Sterling, you returned. We need to discuss Nia's treatment plan. Her kidneys are not responding well, but the dialysis is keeping her stable. We are hoping to Hunter cut him off. He put a hand on his chest, composing his face into a mask of tragic grief so quickly it was terrifying to watch. He looked down at Nia and let out a shuddering sigh. "Doctor, look at her. Look at my poor, beautiful wife. She hates machines. She told me once that she would never want to live like this, hooked up, suffering." I felt the air leave the room. I knew what was coming. Hunter looked at the doctor, tears forming in his eyes that I knew were fake. "She is in so much pain. I can feel it. I cannot watch her suffer anymore. It is cruel to keep her like this just for us." "Hunter, what are you saying?" I asked, my voice low. He turned to me, his eyes cold and dead. "I am saying we need to be humane, Althea." "Doctor, I am revoking consent for the dialysis. Stop the machines. I want to let her go." I stepped between the doctor and the dialysis machine, my body acting as a human shield against their bureaucracy. Marcus looked at me, his hand hovering over the control panel. He was sweating. He knew who I was. He knew I had signed his hiring paperwork 15 years ago, and he knew I did not make idle threats. "You touch that switch, Marcus, and your career ends today," I said, my voice low and vibrating with a threat that was not empty. "I did not train you to give up on a 32-year-old woman because her husband has a flight to catch. Look at her charts. Her heart rate is stabilizing. The antibiotics are working. She is fighting Marcus. Do not let him kill her." Hunter stepped forward, his face twisted in ugly fake grief. "This is harassment. She is in pain, Althea. Let her go." I turned on him so fast he flinched. "She is not in pain. She is in a coma. And you are in a rush. Why is that, Hunter?" "Is the insurance adjuster waiting in the lobby?" Marcus pulled his hand back. "I will give it 24 hours, he said, looking at Hunter. "If there is no improvement by tomorrow morning, we will revisit the order. But for now, we continue." Hunter swore loud and vicious, kicking a trash can as he stormed out of the room. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hall before I turned back to my daughter. The room was quiet again, save for the rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator. I needed to understand. Sepsis does not just happen. It needs an entry point. The report said it started from a laceration on her hand. I pulled the sheet back gently, lifting her left arm. Her hand was heavily bandaged. I began to unwrap the gauze, my movements automatic and precise. When the final layer fell away, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air. The wound was not a kitchen accident. It was not a paper cut. It was a deep, jagged slice running straight across her palm, right at the base of her fingers. The edges were clean, but the depth was severe. I have stitched up thousands of hands in 40 years. I know what it looks like when someone slips slicing a bagel. This was not that. This was the wound of someone who had grabbed a sharp blade with their bare hand to stop it from hitting them. This was a defensive wound. My daughter had not just gotten sick. She had been fighting for her life before she ever arrived here. I wrapped her hand back up my fingers, trembling with a new kind of fury. Hunter had told the doctors she cut herself on a broken wine glass. Another lie. I needed to see where this happened. I needed to see the house. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Hunter was waiting in the corridor on his phone, probably screaming at his lawyer. He saw me and hung up, blocking my path. "Where do you think you are going, Althea? You are not going to that house. I had the locks changed this morning. It is my property." I walked right up to him until I could smell the fear sweating out of his cheap suit. "It is not your property, Hunter. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. You are just a squatter in a silk tie. And if you change the locks, I suggest you call a locksmith because I am going inside that house if I have to drive my car through the front door." I pushed past him, leaving him shouting in the hallway. I had 24 hours to find out what really happened in that kitchen, and God help him if I found what I was looking for. I parked my car at the curb and stared at the house. My name was on the deed, but it felt like a stranger's home. The windows were dark, the blinds drawn tight like eyelids refusing to open. I walked up the path, my keys heavy in my hand. I tried the front door. Locked. I tried the garage code. Changed. Hunter had been busy. He had turned my daughter's home into a fortress. I called the locksmith I had used for 20 years. He was there in 10 minutes, no questions asked, just a sympathetic nod when he saw my face. He drilled the lock, the sound of metal grinding on metal echoing in the quiet street. When the door swung open, the silence inside was suffocating. I stepped into the foyer. It was worse than before. The house had been ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, their contents spilled onto the floor. Nia's office was a disaster, papers scattered everywhere. I walked into the master bedroom. The closet doors were open. Nia's clothes were still there, but the shelves where she kept her jewelry boxes were empty. The wall safe behind the painting was open, its door hanging loose like a broken jaw. Empty. Hunter had cleaned her out. He had taken every diamond, every pearl, every piece of gold she owned. I knelt by the bed. This was where she had been sick. This was where she had lain for days while he poisoned her. I looked under the bed frame. Dust bunnies. A stray earring, and something else. Way back in the corner against the wall was a small orange pill bottle. I reached for it, stretching my arm until my shoulder popped. I grabbed it and pulled it into the light. It was Nia's prescription. Antibiotics. The label said amoxicillin 500 milligrams, the same as the one I found in her bag at the hospital. But something was wrong. The dust on the cap was thick, like it had been sitting there for weeks, but the refill date was only 10 days ago. I opened the bottle. Inside were 6 blue and white capsules. They looked identical to the ones in the hospital bag. I poured one into my palm. It felt light, too light. I twisted the capsule, pulling the two halves apart. White powder spilled onto my hand. It did not smell like medicine. It did not have that sharp chemical scent. It smelled like nothing. I wet my finger and touched the powder, then touched it to my tongue. Sweet. It was sugar. It was not medicine. It was sugar. I sat back on my heels, the room spinning. Hunter had swapped her pills. He had taken the real antibiotics and replaced them with sugar capsules. He had watched her take them day after day, smiling while the infection ravaged her body. He had not just neglected her, he had actively intercepted her cure. I poured the rest of the capsules into my hand. I opened another one. Sugar. And another. Sugar. Every single one was fake. This was it. This was the smoking gun. He had manufactured her death. I put the powder back into the capsule and snapped it shut. I put the bottle in my purse, zipping it into the inside pocket. I stood up, my knees creaking. The house felt cold, now freezing. I looked at the empty safe. I looked at the scattered papers. You thought you were clever, Hunter. You thought you covered your tracks, but you missed one bottle, and that one bottle is going to bury you. I did not go to the police station. Not yet. I drove straight to a private pathology lab in Decatur, run by an old colleague named David, who owed me a favor from 1998. I handed him the orange bottle and told him I needed a full chemical breakdown, and I needed it in 1 hour. He took one look at my face, saw the cold fury in my eyes, and didn't ask a single question. He just took the bottle and locked the door. While the centrifuge spun and the machines analyzed the powder, I sat in my car and opened my laptop. I had downloaded Hunter's entire transaction history before I locked him out of the accounts. I needed to know the timeline. I needed to know when the plan began. I scrolled past the dinners, the yacht deposits, the jewelry stores. Then I saw it. A recurring payment starting exactly 8 weeks ago to Zenith Life Insurance. $5,000 a month. I logged into the insurance portal using the password reset trick with Nia's email. I pulled up the policy document. My breath hitched. It was a $5 million term life policy payable upon death with a double indemnity clause for accidental or medical mishap. Hunter was the sole beneficiary. I scrolled to the bottom of the contract to page 40 where the authorization was signed. It said, Nia Jenkins Sterling, in looping cursive. It looked perfect to the untrained eye, but a mother knows her child's hand. I taught Nia how to write her name. I held her hand while she struggled with her cursive in the 3rd grade. Nia was born left-handed. She wrote with a heavy hook curving her letters backward with a distinctive slant to the left. I zoomed in on the screen. This signature leaned forward. It was smooth. It flowed to the right. It was written by a right-handed man practicing a forgery. He had signed her death warrant 2 months ago. My phone buzzed. It was David. I walked back into the lab. He was holding the report, and he looked sick. He did not offer me a seat. He just handed me the paper. Althea, this is not amoxicillin. It isn't even a generic filler or a bad batch from a cheap manufacturer. It is 100% compressed sucrose. Sugar. The room went cold. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a physical blow. Hunter had not just watched her get sick, he had intercepted the cure. He had gone to the pharmacy, filled her real prescription, and then manually emptied every single capsule, refilling them with sugar before giving them to his dying wife. For 2 weeks, while my daughter burned with fever and begged for relief, he had been feeding her sugar pills and watching the infection consume her from the inside out. He had orchestrated a slow, agonizing execution just to cash a check. I thanked David, took the report, and walked back to my car. I placed the report next to the forged insurance document. I had the motive, I had the method, and I had the weapon. Now all I needed was the confession. I checked my watch. It was time to go back to the hospital and put on the performance of my life. Hunter wanted a grieving mother. I was going to give him one right before I buried him. I walked back into the hospital waiting room and forced my shoulders to slump. I let my face slacken into a mask of utter defeat. I had the evidence in my purse. I had the toxicology report that proved he was a killer and the forged insurance papers that proved he was a thief. But evidence in a courtroom takes months, and my daughter did not have months. I needed him to confess. I needed him to feel so safe and so victorious that he would open his mouth and hang himself. Hunter was pacing by the vending machines, barking into his cell phone. He saw me and snapped the phone shut, his eyes narrowing for a fight. He was ready for the angry mother. He was ready for threats. He was not ready for a broken old woman. I stopped in front of him and let a single tear slide down my cheek. I made my hands tremble as I reached out to touch his arm. "You were right, Hunter." I whispered, my voice cracking perfectly. "I spoke to Dr. Hill. He says her organs are shutting down. He says there is no brain activity. I have been so selfish holding on to her when she is in pain." Hunter blinked. The aggression drained out of his face, replaced by a dawn of pure greed. He straightened his jacket, smoothing the lapels. "I tried to tell you, Althea," he said, his voice dropping to that fake sympathetic register that made my skin crawl. "I know you love her, but you are not thinking clearly. You are emotional. I am just trying to do what is best for Nia." I nodded, wiping my eyes with a tissue. "I know. I see that now. I am just an old woman, Hunter. I am tired. I cannot fight you and the doctors and the insurance companies. I just want my baby to be at peace." I looked down at his wrist. He was wearing it. My late husband's Patek Philippe watch. The one Nia kept in a safety deposit box because she was terrified of scratching it. Hunter had it on his wrist, wearing it like a trophy, while he planned to murder the man's daughter. It took every ounce of discipline I possessed not to rip it off his arm. "We should do it tomorrow morning," I said, looking up at him. "When the sun comes up, we will turn off the machines together." A smile twitched at the corner of his mouth. He tried to hide it, but his eyes gave him away. They were shining with the reflection of $5 million. "That sounds beautiful, Althea. Really, it is the right decision." He opened his arms to hug me. A victory hug. A hug that said, "I beat you." I stepped into his embrace. I smelled his cheap cologne and the stale sweat of his desperation. As I wrapped my arms around him, pretending to seek comfort, my right hand moved. I had a listening device in my palm. A tiny magnetic bug no bigger than a dime that I used to use for hospital security audits. As I patted his back, sobbing into his shoulder, I slipped it into the interior pocket of his suit jacket. It slid deep into the lining. He didn't feel a thing. "Thank you for being strong for her, Hunter," I whispered, pulling away. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw genuine pity in his eyes. Pity for the foolish old woman he thought he had conquered. "Go home and get some sleep, Althea. I will handle everything here. I will call the funeral home. I will take care of the arrangements. I bet you will." I thought. I walked away, leaving him standing there, checking the time on my husband's watch, already spending the money in his head. He thought the war was over. He did not know that I had just planted a bomb in his pocket, and I was holding the detonator. Hunter walked out of those automatic doors, and the transformation was instant. The grieving husband vanished, and the arrogance snapped back into place like a rubber band. He loosened his tie, checking his reflection in the glass doors, admiring the performance he had just given. I sat in my car 2 blocks away with a receiver pressed to my ear, listening to the static of his movements. He hailed a cab and gave the address of the Ritz-Carlton. Of course. He was not going home to mourn. He was going to celebrate. I listened as he walked into the hotel bar. I heard the clinking of glasses, the low hum of expensive conversation. Then I heard her voice. The girl from the yacht. She had flown in just like I knew she would. "Did you do it, baby?" she asked, her voice high and breathy. "It is done," Hunter said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. The old hag bought the whole act. Hook, line, and sinker. She was crying on my shoulder, apologizing to me. Can you believe it? She actually apologized for doubting me. I adjusted the volume, my hand hovering over the record button, ensuring every syllable was captured in high definition. "And the wife?" the girl asked. Hunter laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "She is done. We pull the plug tomorrow morning. I have to hand it to her. She fought hard. I spent 2 weeks swapping those pills out by hand. Do you know how tedious that is? Emptying antibiotic capsules and filling them with sugar grain by grain. I thought the infection would take her out last week, but she held on. But it does not matter now. The end result is the same. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the car air conditioning. He was confessing. He was bragging about the slow, agonizing murder of my daughter to a woman he was buying drinks for with money he did not have yet. "What about the money?" the girl asked. "Is it really $5 million?" $5 million from the insurance alone, Hunter said, plus the trust fund. Once Nia is gone, I am the sole beneficiary. And get this, I am going to use the funeral to launch the startup. Imagine the press coverage, the tragic widower dedicating his life work to his late wife. Investors eat that stuff up. It is going to be the networking event of the season. He paused to take a drink. I could hear the ice clinking against the glass. "That old woman is so stupid," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "She thinks she is in control because she froze the cards. But tomorrow when her daughter dies, she will be so broken with grief she will sign whatever I put in front of her just to make the pain stop. She will sign over the assets, the house, the company, everything, just so she can go back to Florida and rot. I won." I reached over and stopped the recording. The silence in my car was deafening. He thought he had won. He thought I was stupid. He thought tomorrow was going to be his coronation. He had no idea that he had just recorded his own confession. And he had no idea that while he was drinking overpriced scotch and planning a funeral, my daughter was waking up. The hospital at 3 a.m. feels less like a medical facility and more like a cathedral. It is quiet, holy, and filled with the silent prayers of the desperate. But I was not praying. I was supervising. Dr. Hill stood by the IV stand, a syringe in his hand filled with a clear liquid that cost more than Hunter's car. It was a specific counteragent to the immunosuppressant we found in her blood, mixed with a cocktail of broad-spectrum antibiotics strong enough to kill a horse. This was not standard protocol. This was a Hail Mary pass thrown by a mother who refused to lose the game. "Do it," I said. My voice was a whisper, but in the silence of that room, it sounded like a shout. Marcus injected the solution into the port. I watched the fluid travel down the clear plastic tube and disappear into my daughter's vein. It looked like water, but to me it looked like retribution. We sat there, 2 doctors watching the monitors like stockbrokers watching a crash ticker waiting for the bounce. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, which had been erratic and fast like a trapped bird, began to slow. The jagged lines on the screen smoothed out. Her blood pressure, which had been dangerously low, started to tick upward. 1 point, 2 points. The fever that had made her skin feel like paper left in the sun began to break. I saw a bead of sweat roll down her temple. Then I felt it, a flutter against my palm. I looked down at her hand. Her index finger twitched. Then her thumb. It was weak, barely a tremor, but it was movement. It was life. I leaned down, bringing my lips right next to her ear. I needed to reach her. I needed to pull her back from the edge, and I knew the only thing strong enough to do that was the truth. "Nia," I whispered. "Can you hear me, baby? It is Mama. You have to listen to me. You have to fight. Hunter did this to you." I felt her hand stiffen in mine. He swapped your medicine, baby. He gave you sugar pills while you were dying. He bought a $5 million policy on your life, and right now he is celebrating your funeral in a hotel bar with another woman. It was a cruel thing to say to a dying woman. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. But I knew my daughter. Sadness might kill her, but rage would wake her up. A tear squeezed out from the corner of her closed eye, hot and fast, tracking through the sweat on her cheek. She heard me. The pain of that betrayal was sharp enough to cut through the coma. Her eyelids fluttered. They were heavy, weighed down by weeks of poison, but she forced them open. Her brown eyes were unfocused at first, swimming in confusion. Then they found me. They locked onto my face, and I saw the fog clear. Mama. The word was just a shape of air, no sound behind it, but I saw it. I put a finger to my lips, silencing her before she could try to speak again. I wiped the tear from her cheek with my thumb. Shh. Save your strength. Do not try to talk. Just listen. She blinked, looking at me with a question in her eyes. He is coming back in the morning, I whispered, smoothing her hair. He is coming to put on a show. He thinks he is going to turn off these machines. He thinks he has won. I squeezed her hand, feeling a faint squeeze back. We are going to let him think that. We are going to let him stand right here and show the world exactly who he is. And then, my darling, we are going to burn him to the ground. Can you do that for me? Can you wait? Nia closed her eyes, but this time the corner of her mouth tightened. It was not a smile, it was a promise. Tomorrow we perform. The morning sun did not bring warmth to room 412. Instead, it illuminated the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air like tiny specters waiting for a soul to carry. The room was crowded now, suffocating. Hunter stood at the head of the bed playing the role of the grieving widower with an intensity that would have earned him an Oscar if the audience wasn't a room full of people who knew he was a monster. He had changed his shirt, but kept the wrinkled jacket a calculated wardrobe choice to suggest a man too distraught to care for himself. His cheap lawyer stood by the door clutching a briefcase that contained the papers he thought would hand him the keys to my kingdom. I sat in the corner chair, my posture slumped, my hands clutching a handkerchief. I made myself look small. I made myself look defeated. I needed him to feel powerful because a powerful man is a careless man. Hunter was putting on a show for the nurses' station for the records, for the imaginary cameras he seemed to think were always rolling on his life. He stroked Nia's hair, his touch light and performative. "I cannot believe it has come to this," he whispered, his voice cracking on cue. "My beautiful girl. We had so many plans." He reached for a box of tissues on the bedside table with his left hand, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly dry. But his right hand, the one hidden below the bed rail, was busy. I watched his reflection in the dark glass of the turned-off television monitor mounted on the wall. He was not holding Nia's hand. He was holding his phone. His thumb moved rapidly across the screen. I knew exactly who he was texting. The girl at the Ritz. The accomplice. I could almost see the message forming in the air above his head. About to be rich. He hit send and slipped the phone back into his pocket in one smooth motion, then returned his hand to Nia's shoulder, squeezing it as if he were trying to impart his strength to her fading body. The audacity of it made my blood boil, but I forced my breathing to remain shallow and uneven. "Mr. Sterling," the lawyer said, checking his watch with a dramatic sigh. "The doctor is ready. We should not prolong this." "It is a kindness, really." Hunter looked up at Dr. Hill. Marcus stood by the ventilator, his face a mask of professional detachment, though I knew his heart was racing as fast as mine. He looked at me for a split second, a microscopic glance that asked, "Are we really doing this?" I gave the slightest dip of my chin. A permission, a command. Dr. Hill stepped forward. His hand hovered over the power switch of the ventilator. The machine hissed and clicked, a rhythmic reminder of the life it was sustaining. "Mr. Sterling Marcus," said his voice grave. "Once I deactivate the ventilator and stop the dialysis support, cardiac arrest will likely follow within minutes. There will be no turning back. Are you absolutely certain this is your wish?" The room went deathly silent. The only sound was the mechanical breath of the machine and the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Hunter took a deep breath, expanding his chest. He looked down at Nia one last time. He did not see a wife. He did not see a person. He saw a barrier to a bank account. He saw an obstacle to his freedom. He looked up at the doctor, his expression somber, his eyes devoid of anything human. He nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. "Do it," he said. "Set her free." "Stop." My voice cracked through the air like a whip, freezing the doctor's hand inches from the switch. I stood up, shedding the skin of the grieving mother like a heavy coat on a hot day. I reached into my bag, grabbed the thick manila file containing the toxicology report and the forged insurance papers, and I threw it. I did not hand it to him. I threw it with every ounce of strength I had. The heavy file struck Hunter square in the chest, papers exploding outward and fluttering to the linoleum floor like dead leaves. "What are you doing?" Hunter shouted, stumbling back, his hands flying up defensively. "She has lost her mind. Doctor, get security. The only thing I have lost, Hunter, is my patience." I said, my voice steady and loud enough to reach the heavens. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the volume already cranked to the maximum. "You want to pull the plug. You want to play the grieving husband. Let us hear your rehearsal from last night at the Ritz-Carlton." I pressed play. The sound of clinking ice and bar chatter filled the ICU room, followed by Hunter's voice, crisp and undeniable. "The old hag bought the whole act hook, line, and sinker. She has done $5 million from the insurance alone I won." The silence that followed the recording was heavier than the grave he dug for my daughter. Hunter's face underwent a transformation that was terrifying to behold. The mask of sorrow did not just slip, it shattered. His skin turned the color of wet ash. His eyes darted around the room looking for an exit, looking for an ally but finding only judgment. His lawyer, the man in the cheap suit who had been so eager to file motions 5 minutes ago, took 2 large steps backward. He held his hands up, palms out, physically distancing himself from Hunter as if stupidity and malice were contagious diseases. "That is, AI?" Hunter stammered, sweat breaking out instantly across his forehead. "That is a deep fake. She fabricated it. It is a digital recording with a time-stamped geolocation data and chain of custody from a private investigator," I said, stepping over the scattered papers until I was right in his face. "But here is the punchline, Hunter. The joke is on you. Even if you succeeded, even if Marcus turned that machine off right now and she died, you get nothing." I kicked a piece of paper toward him with the toe of my shoe. "You were so busy trying to steal my daughter's life, you forgot to read the fine print of the family you married into. The Jenkins Family Trust has a fail-safe clause, Clause 42. In the event of Nia's death before the age of 40 without children, the entire estate, the house, the investments, the company bypasses the spouse completely." Hunter stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. "It all goes to charity, Hunter, specifically the Red Cross. The surviving spouse is entitled to a one-time bereavement stipend." I leaned in close, smelling the fear on him. $100. That is what you killed for. $100. Just enough for a taxi ride to the county jail. "You wretched old witch hunter," screamed the veneer of the sophisticated businessman, dissolving completely into the raw violence of a cornered animal. The realization that he was not just broke, but destitute, that he was not inheriting a kingdom but a jail sentence, snapped the last thread of his sanity. He lunged across the small space between us, his hands hooked into claws reaching for my throat. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, focused entirely on extinguishing the woman who had burned his future to ash. I did not flinch. I stood my ground, ready to fight him with my bare hands if I had to. But before his fingers could graze the silk of my blouse, a sound cut through the chaos of the room. It was a sound wet and guttural, a sound of supreme effort and defiance. We both froze. Hunter stopped mid-lunge, his hands hovering in the air, his breath coming in jagged gasps. Slowly, terrifyingly, we turned our heads toward the hospital bed. Nia was sitting up. It was a struggle, her muscles atrophied from weeks of poison and coma, her skin still pale as moonlight, but she was upright. Her whole body trembled with the exertion, the hospital gown slipping off one shoulder. Her eyes were open, and they were not glazed or confused. They were burning with a clarity that was sharper than any scalpel. Nia Hunter whispered the name falling from his lips like a curse. She did not look at me. She did not look at the doctor. Her gaze was locked on her husband. Her hand, the one with the bruised ring finger where he had stolen her diamond, reached up to her face. Her fingers wrapped around the plastic ventilator tube taped to her mouth. "Don't!" Dr. Hill started to step forward, his instincts kicking in, but I put a hand on his chest to stop him. "Let her," I commanded. With a wet, sickening sound that made the lawyer gag, Nia yanked the tube from her throat. She threw it onto the floor, the plastic clattering against the linoleum. She coughed a harsh, racking sound that shook her thin frame, gasping for air that was finally hers alone to breathe. She swallowed hard, her throat raw and damaged, but when she spoke, her voice, though essentially a whisper, carried the weight of a judgment from God. "You told them I would never want to live as a vegetable, didn't you, Hunter?" She rasped, her voice sounding like gravel grinding on glass. Hunter took a step back, shaking his head, his face the color of old paper. "Nia, baby, I was just—" "Shut up," she hissed, cutting him off. "You were right about one thing. I refuse to die today. Do you know why?" She leaned forward, fighting gravity, fighting the drugs, fighting the death he had tried to feed her. "Because I have to live long enough to watch you rot in a prison cell." Hunter let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He turned to run, to bolt for the door, to escape the resurrection of his victim. But he never made it. The double doors of the ICU room flew open with a crash that shook the walls. "Police, get on the ground now!" Uniformed officers poured into the room, weapons drawn, filling the small space with the authority of the law. They hit Hunter like a linebacker, tackling him into the medical cart, sending trays and instruments crashing to the floor. "Get off me! Do you know who I am?" Hunter shrieked as they twisted his arms behind his back, forcing his face into the cold tiles. "You are a nobody, Hunter," I said, standing over him as the handcuffs clicked shut with a sound that was sweeter than any symphony. "You are just a number now." I looked up at my daughter. She was slumped back against the pillows, exhausted, her chest heaving, but she was smiling. It was a weak, tired smile, but it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. We had won. They hauled Hunter off the floor like a sack of garbage. He was kicking and screaming, shouting about his rights, about his lawyers, about how this was all a misunderstanding. It was pathetic. The man who had strutted into this room an hour ago, thinking he was the king of Atlanta, was now nothing more than a criminal in a wrinkled suit. As they dragged him past me, I held up a hand. "Officer, wait." The policeman paused, gripping Hunter's arm tight. Hunter looked up at me, his face streaked with tears and snot, expecting mercy, expecting me to soften. I leaned in close so only he could hear me. My voice was soft, intimate, almost like I was telling him a secret. "Do not worry about your accommodation, Hunter. I know the private facility where you are heading. In fact, my investment group acquired a majority stake in it 3 months ago." His eyes went wide with horror. "I will make sure you never get a moment of peace. I will make sure every parole hearing is denied. You are not just going to prison, son. You are coming to my house, and in my house, you pay for what you break." He started screaming again, a high-pitched sound of pure terror as they dragged him out the door. Down in the lobby, the second act of this tragedy was concluding. Davis texted me the update. The girl, the one from the yacht who had flown here thinking she was about to become the new Mrs. Sterling, was currently being handcuffed next to the gift shop. It turns out using a stolen credit card to buy a first-class ticket across state lines is a federal offense. She was crying about how she did not know anything but the diamonds in her purse told a different story. I turned to the cheap lawyer who was still standing in the corner looking like he wanted to melt into the wallpaper. I handed him a thick folder. "Here is the rest of it," I said. "The forensic accounting from Nia's design firm. Hunter did not just steal from our personal accounts. He funneled $300,000 from her business into a shell company in the Caymans. That is corporate embezzlement and wire fraud. Add it to the pile." The lawyer took the file without a word and practically ran out of the room, abandoning his client to his fate. Finally, the room was quiet. The police were gone. The doctors had stepped out to give us a moment. It was just me and my daughter. The adrenaline that had been holding me upright for 48 hours suddenly vanished, leaving me shaking. I turned to the bed. Nia was watching me. Her throat was raw from the tube. Her skin was bruised and pale, but her eyes were clear. My little girl, Mama," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. I collapsed onto the edge of the bed and pulled her into my arms. I buried my face in her neck, smelling the antiseptic and the sweat. But underneath that, the smell of my child, the smell of life. "I got you, baby," I sobbed, letting the tears finally fall. "I got you. You are safe. He can never hurt you again." We held each other and cried the kind of tears that cleanse the soul. We cried for the betrayal, for the pain, for the time lost. But mostly we cried because against all odds we had survived. The wolf was in a cage, and the lambs were still standing. 6 months have passed since the day I watched them drag Hunter out of the hospital in handcuffs. 6 months since I nearly lost everything that mattered to me. Life has a way of rearranging itself after a storm. The debris gets cleared, the sun comes out. And sometimes you realize the landscape looks better than it did before. Nia is back at the helm of her design firm. She is stronger now. There is a steel in her spine that wasn't there before. She doesn't tolerate fools, and she certainly doesn't tolerate liars. She sold the house in Buckhead. She said it smelled like betrayal. She bought a penthouse downtown closer to me. We have dinner every Sunday, just the two of us, and a bottle of good wine that we opened ourselves. As for me, I am retired again. Really retired this time. I spend my mornings in the garden and my afternoons with this little rascal. I look down at the golden retriever puppy chewing on my slipper. His name is Justice. Nia named him. A little on the nose, perhaps, but I allow it. I think about Hunter sometimes. Not often. But sometimes in the quiet of the night, I wonder if he is enjoying his new accommodation. The last I heard, he was sharing a cell with a man named Tiny, who is in for armed robbery. I sent him a postcard once, just a picture of the Eiffel Tower, no message, just a reminder of the trip I came back from early, the trip that ruined his life. People ask me how I knew. How did I know to come back? How did I know to check the accounts? How did I know he was lying? I tell them it is simple. A mother always knows. We know when our children are hurting even when they are thousands of miles away. We feel it in our bones. And when we feel it, we don't ask questions. We don't hesitate. We sharpen our knives and we go to war. Hunter made the mistake of thinking I was just an old woman. He thought I was past my prime. He thought he could dazzle me with his charm and his lies. But he forgot that age isn't a weakness. Age is experience. Age is wisdom. And age is patience. I watched him play his game. I let him think he was winning. I let him stand at the finish line, arms raised in victory, just so I could tackle him before he broke the tape. Was it cruel? Maybe. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Because here's the truth about men like Hunter. They don't stop until they are stopped. They consume and they destroy until there is nothing left. If I had been 1 minute late, if I had hesitated for 1 second, my daughter would be in the ground and he would be on a yacht spending her money. So I ask you, was I too harsh? Did I take it too far by letting him believe he had won right up until the moment the handcuffs clicked? Or did I give him exactly what he deserved? Leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done. And remember, if something feels wrong, trust your gut. It might just save a life. The most profound lesson from Althea's story is that underestimating the wisdom and ferocity of a mother is a fatal mistake. Hunter saw Althea merely as an obstacle, an aging woman he could manipulate or push aside. He failed to recognize that her age was not a liability, but her greatest weapon, forging a sharp intellect and an unshakable resolve. He believed his carefully constructed facade of wealth and the grieving husband act could fool everyone, but he couldn't fool a mother's instinct. Furthermore, this story serves as a stark reminder that true power lies not in flashy displays of stolen wealth, but in strategic preparation and legal foresight. Althea's ability to protect her daughter wasn't just about emotional strength. It was about having the intelligence to set up safeguards, like the trust fund clause, long before tragedy struck. Ultimately, evil often plants the seeds of its own destruction through arrogance. Hunter's downfall wasn't just caused by Althea's actions, but by his own hubris in believing he had already won before the game was even finished. Justice may be slow, but as Althea proved, it is inevitable. If you believe that a mother's intuition is the most powerful force on earth, hit that like button and subscribe to Never Too Old for more stories of justice served cold.